Hi, I'm Crystal Marshall, and for any poor sod that wants to know about my life in a small amount of compact time, then carry on and listen. If you don't want to be bored to death, don't. I was born Genestra Anne Trower in 1968 in Lewisham Hospital. I grew up around the Forest Hill and Sydenham areas. My grandparents, Frank and Kathleen Trower, lived in Stillness Road in Forest Hill. From there we moved to a place called Hazel Grove, which was a masonette block of flats. As far as I know, I've never really had a decent place to live. The masonettes were hard to live in. There was a grill at the end of the window. We were up in a corridor. People would shit on the stairs and communal areas. It smelt of piss. People skateboarded up and down the corridor. It was a horrible place to live, but you had to live. If your parents were poor, then you were poor and you had to live like that. Our electric was frequently cut off. I remember social services bringing out a stove, a gas stove, because the electric was cut off several times. I was reluctant to let friends in because I was ashamed of where I lived, so I lived a solitary life. Kids would take the mickey out of me. I never had boyfriends. My parents decided to leave Sydenham, SE26, when I was in my last year of school, which was my exams, and Dad moved down to Chatham. Dad had been a TV installer. He worked for Granada Vision Hire, and I remember having trips in the back of his van to the customers because I enjoyed that, and moved down here in 1985 to Chatham, where I stayed 2 years, and then I met my husband and moved to Gloucestershire in 1987. I lived in Gloucestershire for 22 years. 18 of those years I was married to Dave. You know, things go wrong, and you know, when my children say to me it was my fault, it was a combination of things that led up to the breakup of the marriage. I decided to make a clean break, and I came back down to Chatham in 2008. I was in a terrible state. In between times, between 2004 and 2008, and coming back down here after I'd left my husband, I found myself homeless and in women's aid accommodation, if you like, sheltered, well, what do they call them? Safe houses for women, because after Dave I'd met a man that I don't want to name him, but he lived in Camden in London, and him and his son shouted at me and didn't treat me properly. So I came back to Gloucestershire and was put in a women's refuge, which was in Weston Road, Gloucestershire, which I lived there for 6 months. And it was horrible. I was pregnant with my 4th child, who is called Anthony. I suffered immense bullying. I don't know whether it was hate crime, racist crime, but the refuge bullied me. I remember a woman called Jenny telling me that if I didn't make meetings, I'd be thrown out pregnant. You had to clean. It was horrible. It was like a prison, and I couldn't wait to get out there. And after 6 months of being in a women's refuge, I was then transported to Alexandra Road, Gloucester, which was second house staging, moving on from women's refuge accommodation. It was a ground floor flat. It was in a basement. The kitchen had no windows. The bathroom had no windows. The view from my kitchen was a brick wall. Again, it was like a prison. It was mouldy and damp. My son was born in this accommodation in 2005 on December the 14th, whereupon me and myself were in Gloucestershire Royal Hospital. Nobody else came with me, no one in the ambulance. The child's father didn't turn up. I was left alone. I had no visitors. I felt awful. I had 54p on the electric meter, and the women's aid workers did not drive me to the post office, so I'd just given birth the same day, and I walked to the post office with Anthony in a car seat to put electric on my key. And I went home, and he was there with me. He was my pride and joy. I looked after him. Unfortunately, I got sick, and I don't think women should lose their children because they get a mental illness or baby blues or whatever you call it, but at that time I held on to my son. I'd been diagnosed with puerperal psychosis, which is baby blues, by 5 unknown social workers. At that stage they thought it was quite safe to leave my son with me when I was gasping for breath, crawling on the floor and not being able to look after myself. So I found it strange in 2008 when he was taken off me. Tony is now been fully adopted. He has new parents. I don't see him. I have no contact. I don't have a letter or anything at all. And there's a hole in my heart. And people outside, when they're cruel to me and bully me because of my facial features, I've got more things to worry about than what I look like, thank you, or men abusing me, using me for sex. And this began when I met this guy in Camden. When I left him, you get lonely. I mean, any woman does. My main priority was, of course, Anthony. Of course it was. He got fed. He got his nappies changed. He got looked after. He was a chubby baby with extremely dark curly hair, which later on they cut off and said he had alopecia, and to my knowledge he never did. Like I said, once a child is given to social services, you have no chance of getting him back, and that's what happened to me, and I have to live without him. And at the moment, you just carry on day to day and hope that when he's 18, that I can tell him exactly what happened, exactly what they did, and the circumstances leading up to him being taken off me. For all I know, that poor child thinks I dumped him, didn't want him. Basically, I'm not going to go into full specific details, but I was arrested for a crime I didn't commit. While I was in the police cells, social services were called, and my son was taken away from me because my flat apparently was in an unhygienic state. Bonnie Stevens in a red car came out and said to me that after 2 weeks of intense cleaning of my flat, I would get my child returned to me. But I was so distressed, I had a black eye, someone had beaten me over the head with a metal pipe, that I felt that I couldn't cope alone in the flat without some support. So I got a one-way ticket to Chatham and stayed with my parents. And from September the 3rd, 2008 to now, this is where I am. I have no access to Anthony whatsoever. I have to wait till he's 18 and then he will decide if he can see his own mother. It's up to him entirely. In the meantime, between 2004 and 2008, several men sexually abused me. They would make out they were wanting to date me, and then they would want... I have to be explicit, because that's the only way to tell people of the torture that I've gone through. They wanted blowjobs while Tony was upstairs. And when I tried to see my baby, they said that it's no good crying. You wanted it, sort of thing. I have been anally raped. I have been used for sex and a sex slave, in my opinion, and tortured sexually. When men meet me, it's like shove my head on their cock, shove my hand on their cock, pushed, shoved. They don't feed me, they don't take me for a drink, they don't talk to me, they just want sex. They smoke drugs over me. I have a chest infection because I was in a smoker's room the other day. It doesn't stop while the perpetrators and the sexual abusers think they can get away from using my body for sex. They won't let me have any access to any of my children at all. I've been walloped, punched, shouted at, degraded, called names. This is my life. I don't like it. I don't like the way I'm living. I don't like the place I'm living at. The steep incline up to the flats does my lungs in. Up the stairs there's no lift. All these men keep trying to get me pregnant, and I have to just escape it. I'm called ugly, I'm called fat, I'm called dog, I'm no good. I have to pick up things for people, like a doggy. Fetch the paper, fetch this, get my dinner, do this, do that. I'm not treated like a human being. And after all these things I do for people, I find myself very ill in a flat with no help. I have no car, I have no financial support. Family members are ill themselves, or they live far away. I spend my nights in the flat, on my tablet, playing games, reading books. It's a very lonely, miserable existence, waiting for a man to call on the phone to abuse me again. I can't get out of it. It's just become a way of life. I don't want to meet men. I want a relationship where a man will take me out to the cinema on my birthday, which never happens. I go by myself. Last year I went to see Walk Among the Tombstones, and you've got couples kissing in the back, kissing at the side, and you just sat there and you eat your sweets and you eat your drink. When I went to see 50 Shades of Grey, a female slammed the door on my finger. I'm treated like I'm a piece of excrement, and I can't change it. Police records say I'm a loony, so I try and act like one now. Well, all the men say I'm mad. They didn't do anything to me at all. So there you go, and I'm not going to say any more. I'm 47 years old on the 27th of September. My son is fostered, and what can I say? Life sucks.